Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Seen and Affirmed What Black Educators and Students Need to Thrive live panel. My name is Jaleesa Johnson, and I am leading the Black Educator Advocates Network. The Black Educator Advocates Network is a movement created to transform the environment, practices, and policies that affect the educational experience for Black educators, administrators, students, and parents. Today, co-moderating with me, I have Dr. Darren Earley, a director at LMU Families of Schools. Dr. Earley, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. Hi, Jaleesa. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Pleasure to be on today. My name is Darren Earley. I'm the director of the Loyola Marymount University Family of Schools. I am a career educator, began in the middle school and then went on to high school and then did administration. I'm a graduate of Howard University. I am also a graduate of the University of Southern California, so I have the best of both worlds, a very strong HBCU and a very strong PWI in terms of where I received my training. And then finally, I would just say this. I am a father of five, a husband of one, and I just am passionate about education and what we can do as Black folks for us and by us. So it's a joy to be here today, and I'm excited about the conversation.
Thank you again, Dr. Earley, for co-moderating with me today. Like Dr. Earley said, today is important for us to have a discussion around the importance of Black educators in our schools and the Black leadership that exists in our schools. And so we, at the Black Educator Advocates Network, spent some time late last year to create a report that launched just last week called The Seen and Affirmed: What Black Educators and Students Need to Thrive Data Brief. This report looks at best practices for Black educators and Black students. I'm going to present some findings that we have gathered in the report. More than 78,000 Black students are in schools with no Black teachers. That means more than half of schools in California don't have a Black teacher. And this is a crisis because we know that all students feel more supported, learn better, and are more engaged when they have Black teachers. We also know specifically Black students do significantly better when they have a Black educator that looks like them. In our process of interviewing Black educators and school leaders, we created a list of best practices for both Black educators and students to thrive in our public schools. These best practices showed on the screen revealed that Black educators and students need an anti-racist, culturally responsive, and inclusive school environment. They need staff that look like the students, provide spaces for Black educators to be heard and affirmed, and create opportunities for Black educators to lead. Black students specifically need their parents to be engaged as co-educators. They need opportunities for Black students to build community and embed culture in everything, and establish high expectations for Black students and give them rigorous content. Today, we have a panel filled of Black educators and school leaders to hear more of their experiences and why this issue is so important to them. So I would like to take some time to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Lisa Cooper from Culver City High School. We have Taquita Aguilar from Aspire Juanita Tate, a school leader. And we have Miss Felicia Lewis, a teacher in LAUSD.
Hi, ladies.
Hi, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to really jump right in because folks are here to hear from you all. So I'm going to start us off with the first question so that we can learn more about each of you. So can each of you introduce yourself and explain some of your experiences as Black women in education?
Dr. Cooper, why don't you start?
I didn't want to be rude, but I'll jump in and start. I'm Dr. Lisa Cooper. I've been in education for about 25 years. And I will have to say, mine was probably a unique pathway of my why and why I'm here and what keeps me here. And that really is a connection with our youth. I grew up in a family of athletics, coaching, and mentoring. And that was really my first stepping stone into education, of being a coach and eventually a teacher, a counselor, and an administrator. And I've been principal at Culver City High School for the past 7 years. And I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you.
I can step in and go next. Hello, everyone. I'm Taquita Aguilar. I work and serve in the community of South Central Los Angeles, now South Los Angeles. I have been in education now for 10 years. What brought me to this space is just the acknowledgement that I am one of 5 of my mother's children to graduate from college, and the reality of the access it has given me, the ability to be a middle-class African-American woman in this country, and my passion for education. And so I actually serve in the community that raised my mother. My mother went to Fremont High School, and that is the high school that my students, if they choose to go to, they will go to. I am super passionate about mathematics, like super passionate about it. I've taught elementary in South LA. I've also taught some middle school, and now I'm back in South LA as a principal at Juanita Tate Academy.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Lewis. I was the kid who, towards the end of the summer, would force my friends to play school, and I was always the teacher in that scenario. I think I was mostly shaped by my 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. James, at Whaley Middle School in Compton, and I just looked up to her. Coming from a low-income background and not having any college-educated women in my family, for me, she was the inspiration. I saw her as being well-respected, having high integrity, and really excellent at her craft. So I wanted to be like Mrs. James, and she happened to be a teacher.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, with more than 78,000 Black students in schools without a Black educator in California, how has your school or district attempted to address this crisis? And we're going to ask this question specifically to our school leaders that are on this call. Taquita Aguilar, feel free to go first.
And before you guys jump in, I just want to, can we contextualize this a little bit?
Sure thing.
Right. And the context is just this, is that when we think in terms of these numbers, we're talking about the unintended consequences of the Brown decision. Everybody looks at the Brown decision as being so impactful and how it's really changed education. But for us as Black folks, it kind of did some things. So as you would share your answers, Dr. Cooper and Ms. Aguilar, speak to, what happened as a result of that decision, and then what do we see now?
So I think one of the pieces is the acknowledgement that this is an issue, right? So when you're talking about schools and districts shifting our teaching personnel and who is in front of our Black students, it's first acknowledging that it is a problem when the majority of Black students are taught by non-Black teachers. When you're talking about Brown v. Board, it is the fact that not only did, yes, integration, right? We want to celebrate that. And we also just want to state the fact that this means Black teachers who were teaching Black students before, right, that they were laid off. This means that they no longer had a job, but it also means when you're a Black child walking into a school building, you are decreasing the chances that you're going to see a leader, because all teachers are leaders, a leader who looks like you, someone who sounds like you, someone who's from your community, somebody who recognizes you as you are, right? And so in knowing that, that goes back to me saying schools and districts need to recognize this as an issue. When we have a majority of schools where there are Black children and there are not Black teachers, I think first you need to think about how are we recruiting teachers in the first place. You'll hear there aren't a lot of Black educators in the workforce. And while that might be so, I think there's intentionality around who you place in classrooms. And at this time in education, there is a stronger sentiment to have anti-racist practices, right? And I think when you're talking about placing adults in front of students, one of those practices is making sure that you are recruiting folks who are part of that community. It is a strong belief of mine that you cannot serve a community that you do not know. And while you can be someone who is not of that race and know that community, it is more likely that if you came from that community, you look like that community, then you are better equipped to serve that community. And so one thing I do want to spotlight my district doing, they have really thought about the questions in which we ask folks when we're interviewing them. So if our mission is around anti-racism, and if our mission is about making sure that we're putting adults in classrooms who know the community, then when you are asking questions, just to put them in the classroom, just the interview piece, some of those questions need to reflect that. I think the other piece is just intentionality around the ratio in which, like when I think about my school site, I am happy to say that my teachers look like the children that we serve. And that's important because we know Black students and brown students do better when their teachers look like them. And I feel like that's an unfortunate truth, right? What you're going to hear is folks like, wait, I can't serve in that community because I'm not a part of that community. Is that what you're saying? I was like, no, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to recognize that the data says, we're talking about best practices, Black students do better when they have Black teachers. And if that is the case, then when you're talking about hiring, promoting from within, when you're talking about recruiting, you need to be intentional around hiring Black educators.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Cooper.
Thank you. And Ms. Aguilar said it perfectly. And just to add on a few things, and what I appreciate about this panel is we're all Black educators, but we do come from different schools and communities, but we all have something to share that's valuable. I do come from a school where my African-American student population is about 16%. But to me, I fight just as hard for it because I feel like we have to do better and we need to make sure that there's representation in our classroom, no matter if it's 100% or 16%. And so I really put out those efforts to make sure that we're doing that. And one thing that I was really proud about our district is we had an equity advisory council. And they worked really hard over the past year to develop an equity and inclusion plan and social justice plan. And one of the main pieces that I really am proud of, like Ms. Aguilar said, was the hiring practices. The awareness was important to say that we can do better. And that's what we were able to do through this plan and through the committee to say we can do better to represent our students and have this in our classrooms, our teachers of color. And so the plan definitely points out that we can do better in our hiring practices and our recruitment efforts. And also, too, when you think of our students, part of this, too, should just be making sure that all of our teachers are able to build relationships with students. And I think this is going to come out deeper in our conversation, but I did want to touch on that not only the hiring and recruitment part of this, but making sure that all of our teachers can build relationships and respect our students as individuals and what their needs are.
Excellent, excellent. Before we go to our next question, both of you talked about the intentionality around recruitment. Speak to me about retention also, because that's one of the challenges. Even if we get them in the door, what are the things that we need to do to keep them in the building?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was also part of our plan, was the retainment of teachers, that it's important that we provide them mentorship, opportunities for growth, leadership, and also spaces where they can connect with other teachers of colors, like affinity groups. And you kind of still in my response to a future discussion. Definitely that's important. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to bring that to the forefront and have that in the front of every conversation.
Excellent.
Yeah. To add to that, I would also say just acknowledging the strengths in our Black educators. And by acknowledging, I don't mean like just saying, oh, you're doing great work. I mean proper pay for that great work. I mean chances for leadership opportunities because they're doing great work. And I also mean giving them credit for the work that they are doing. And so often you might have a Black educator who maybe they had a really great idea, or you just walk into their classroom and you notice they are naturally a warm demander and you're trying to teach your staff how to be this warm demander, right? Or for whatever reason, they happen to be able to integrate culturally responsive practices better than another educator, right? And we get the good job and you're doing great work, but we don't get the promotion, or we don't get the opportunity for leadership, or we don't get the recognition when when a leader is in a space and able to give that recognition. So I'm going to say pay us properly. That would be helpful. Give us leadership opportunities and make sure we're giving credit when our work, when you notice our work is good.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Earley, for mentioning that piece of retention, because it's so important. And we have the pleasure of having a Black educator on this panel. And so, Ms. Felicia, I really want to hear from you of when you think about your journey to the classroom, what specifically would have made that transition easier?
Oh, thank you for the question. So this is my 11th year in education. The bulk of that time was not in the classroom. I worked for many years as a paraprofessional, serving as intervention teacher, serving in teacher vacancy positions. I also work with nonprofits such as Upper Bound and Science Innovation Camp. So I did the gambit of things. I did in-home tutoring for foster youth. The major thing why I spent so much time not in the classroom, although I was definitely ready for the classroom, was quite honestly financial. I was already in default from undergraduate student loans, which disqualified me for future loans. The programs that I would hear about were retrospective, like, oh, you've already gotten your credential, now you're in an inner city, we'll pay you back. And frankly, I don't need the help then. Now I have a salary, correct? And then other programs that I hear about, like Teach for America, which seems like a great program, very competitive and really benefits folks who don't need the help, folks who have a 3.8 in undergraduate because it was a smooth sale for them, right? So financially, it was very difficult for me to get into a credentialing program. And however, all of those other experiences strengthened me as a teacher.
Excellent.
Thank you.
What it's amazing that you guys, that specifically you, Felicia, you spoke to, just to that economic barrier, because that's a hurdle for a lot of things. But our goal is to increase the number of educators in the space. And hearing from either of you, talk to us about some other barriers that need to be named in order for us to achieve the goal of increasing the number of teachers. And we're talking about barriers within the credentialing process, barriers maybe within the K-16 schooling process, societal barriers. What are those things that get in the way of us having more teachers that look like the babies that we want to serve?
I think direct recruitment, you go to a Black church, you see on the fan, be a foster parent. Where is the recruitment for be a teacher? Where is that at? I think there's a misconception that the job is just so hard and is not well compensated, which is somewhat true. But I think that we have to figure out a way to make it attractive to recent college graduates, because a lot of them are just working jobs that honestly do not require their degrees. And this is like a warehouse of knowledge of, young people that we can be bringing into the profession that would, strengthen our community. So I think we're just not looking for them. We're not recruiting actively enough for them. I think that's the major issue.
Okay. Dr. Cooper or Ms. Aguilar? Don't be shy. Jump in.
I would have to add to that. I think there needs to be more support going through the process. I remember going through the process myself, just in getting counseling credential, administrative credential, and it's not easy. It's often hard to find information, often to find the person to connect with. And even when we're talking about at the college level, I remember it myself, and I see it as a parent now with my daughter in college. And it really comes down to those opportunities. And it really comes down to those resources that are intentional in supporting more Black educators. And those are the barriers that we have to look at. And like I say, navigating college and the credentialing process itself is not easy. So imagine adding on to that, being a Black educator trying to get through that process and wondering, where's your support and where's that mentorship coming through that?
Okay. Ms. Aguilar, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the barriers that exist once you get in the door, right? So I completely agree with everything that was said, and the fact that it is difficult to navigate this system by yourself. And so yes to mentors, yes to coaches when we're talking about getting more Black educators in schools. And then I'm also thinking about the mindsets that exist once you're in the school building. And I think there needs to be a reevaluation of what we mean when we say professionalism as it relates to our Black educators. So prime example, I'd say, like, for instance, like how we wear our hair, right? If we know that we need to shift the way in which we show up in an interview and that we cannot show up as our natural selves, that's a problem. Like, that's a barrier, right? And for me, like, it's the mindsets. I think it's also knowing that when you choose to serve a community that looks like you and you choose to serve that community in a system that was not made for you, that is a lot of heart work, right? And so not only do we have to show up, I was a math and science teacher for many years. Not only do I have to show up and teach math, but I also have to show up as a Black woman to support my Black students, knowing the potential harm that this system has caused them or will cause them, right? And so I think that could go to affinity groups, that could go to like mental health and emotional wellness support for our Black educators, because it's not just getting them in the door, it's keeping them there. And it is understanding. I think this is the missing piece for those who are not Black. It is recognized that this work is very difficult emotionally and draining for Black educators. Again, when we exist within a system that was, in my opinion, created to harm who we are and people who look like us.
Excellent. Excellent. I wanted to ask you, because as we spoke about this, you guys talked about authentic representation. You guys talked about mentorship. You talked about, and I love the fact, Dr. Aguilar, Ms. Aguilar, when you talked about, the ability to be your authentic self. But talk to me about just the perception amongst Black youth of teaching as a profession. When they think in terms of, is this something I want to do? We've done a lot of work just, exposing young people and going out to schools, talking to young folks about teaching. Talk to us about that perception of teaching as a profession, and what do we need to do about that? You did mention professionalism, so keep on going with that.
I think what's interesting with that question is I am an educator and I love education, and the school has always been like, I've loved school since I was a small child. I never wanted to be a teacher, And I did not want to be a teacher because I knew teachers didn't make money. And to be honest, like, I needed to lift myself up out of something that I had no control over as a child, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when you're thinking about the circumstances in which we exist in, if you do come from poverty, or if you do come from a low income household, your goal is to make money. Like, your goal is to make money. Right. And now in education, I think teachers need to be paid more, period. That is the case. Like, we do so much for our students, right? But I think one perception of educators is that we don't get paid enough. And so if I'm trying to become like higher income, that is not my route. I think the other piece, when you're talking about professionalism and showing up as my authentic self, I would often get in the classroom like, Miss Aguilar, you're not like other teachers, right? And it is much easier to believe that you can do something when you see somebody who speaks like you, who looks like you, doing exactly that. And so even if you are a Black, brown, whatever educator, if our students don't see themselves in you, in the way that you talk and what you listen to, even in how you walk, right? And talk with your hands, right? If they don't see themselves in you, they're going to have this perception that is not who I'm supposed to be, right? Because I have never seen a teacher who acts, walks, talks like me.
Excellent. Anybody else want to speak to that issue of just a perception of teaching? And that was an excellent response, because it touched on all the different pieces that I was thinking anyway. Ms. Lewis, Dr. Cooper, any thoughts?
Well, what I'm reliving is an experience last semester. Well, I guess it was when we were going to school in person. And one of my students, I had my hair out, I had my curls popping, as they say. And one of my curly haired students was like, "Oh, Miss Lewis, let's take a picture together. Look, we have our hair the same today, And so we took a little ussy, and it was cute. It was a cute moment. And I didn't think too much of it in the moment. But later on, when there were discussions about Black women's hair, in a professional setting, and I know that when I first started, I was pulling my hair back. I was tying it back. I was, I didn't want to wear hoop earrings. These are things that were going on in my mind, right? Because I wanted to be perceived as professional. But that moment affirmed for me that my student needed me to be who I am. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to affirm what you were saying. That is absolutely important. And that's just one small piece as to why it's important to have us in the classroom.
Excellent.
And I just wanted to add on and thank you, Ms. Aguilar, for bringing this up, because this is being transparent and bringing the truth out. And we're not just talking about our educators in the classroom. We're talking about the leaders you see in front of you today, because not only is it difficult to be a leader of color, but imagine a Black woman in a leadership role and the challenges that we face, and bringing up those issues of like what's professional, what's not professional. And one thing that I really have learned through this is you have to be your authentic you, and your students have to see you for who you see yourself. And that's really important. And that is a lesson that I had to learn and do better, just because of that's what I grew up in. That's what I saw. Students were not used to seeing a woman of color being a principal. And and so those were things that actually inspired me and told me, like, you need to be true to yourself. And you are here for the best, and you're doing everything. Be true to yourself for your students so they can see the authentic you. In the words of Lori Farmer, one of our attendees, that part. Exactly what you just shared. That is spot on. Jaleesa and I were talking about the report and just kind of going through things. And I kind of want to expand a question. We saw that 78,000 students go to schools without a Black educator. Two questions. One is just this: is that what grade were you in before you had your first Black teacher? The three of you.
Mm-hmm. I'll share why folks are thinking. It wasn't until my 7th grade year that I received a Black woman educator, and she was hard on everyone. She was actually the English teacher that no one wanted, but I had the most fun in her class. So 7th grade for me.
7th grade.
High school for me, and I also was influenced by a Black high school counselor that I had never seen before either.
Okay. Aguilar, Ms. Lewis?
I was an undergraduate at LMU the first time I had a Black professor. Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Psychology 101. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. I had a different experience. I'm a product of Compton Unified School District in the 90s. And all of my teachers up until it was 4th grade where I had my first non-Black educator. So I was fortunate in that experience.
Wait, you said before you had your first non-Black?
Yes, I had all. And then in the 4th grade, it gave me a white man. I was like, whoa. What
are you doing here, man? And the reason why we were talking about that is because when we think in terms of the psychosocial development of young people and just how they kind of, how representation allows them to see themselves in a certain way, and we talk about their perception of teaching, a lot of times it takes that. And when we think in terms of Black males, I know for me, I didn't have a Black male until I got to Howard. And my first Black teacher, educator, she was in high school. And so that's something as we think about that intentional recruitment, we need to really be specific about that. So what I'm going to ask is just this, and it's a double-barreled question, so you can kind of hit it however you want to hit it. The first side is just this, is that for all of you, if you're talking to school leaders, and this school leader says, I want to create a more culturally inclusive school. I want to create a school with anti-racist pedagogy theme mission. What's some suggestions you would give them specifically in terms of first, second, third steps? Not just generally saying, like everybody's doing, we're going to be anti-racist and posting that on on the wall. What would you tell them they need to do to authentically be about that business?
I can get started. So I'm a big proponent of first talking to the community. And so what I want folks to not do is get into anti-racist literature, think that they have the answer, and then inflict these solutions on their school community when they have no idea what's going on. So when I say talk to the community, I mean parents, I mean students, and I also mean educators. So good leaders do a lot of listening first. And so when you're started with this work, I think there needs to be an understanding. This work is not just for you, right? It's the whole community's work. So first step, Where are you as a leader? Where is your school? Where is your community within this work? And that requires a lot of listening, right? And then I'd say the next piece is, once you have the listening, when you're talking about solutions, all of those stakeholders need to be part of the solution. All of them. We did something very similar at my school where it was, even me as a Black educator or Black leader, let me not make an assumption around what my Black community needs.
Right.
So let's listen to them first. And every solution that we have came from the community. And even as we start to act upon those solutions, we are checking in with the community. Is this what you meant when you said this? Nice. Right? And it's an elementary school, and we still had our students as the voices. And is this what you meant when you said this? We decided to do this. Now, how does this feel? These are the things that we're thinking about. And this, me talking to my Black parents, how does this feel? Right? And so first step as a leader, I'd say, is listen to your community. Do not assume that you have all the answers because you are the leader.
Excellent. Excellent. Dr. Cooper, Ms. Lewis, either one?
I definitely think that what Ms. Aguilar said was a good first step, because you don't want to make assumptions about anything, and you want to be productive in your work. So you have to know to move forward. So you do have to listen, and that includes everybody. From your staff, your students, your community, your parents, because everybody has to be a part of the work. And it's hard, and it's a lot for a leader to take on too, to be able to address all the different stakeholders at the same time and be able to move along at the same time. Your student voices are very valuable, so do find a way. I ran a lot of student focus groups, asked them to give me some honest feedback. I think part of the process too is you have to be open and ready for the honesty that's going to come out.
Yes.
Okay. So you can't take it personally. You have to respect everybody and what they're saying and their experiences, because that is their experience and their perspective of where they're coming from. Your job is to understand why that's happening and what you can do to improve that and make changes. And it's not easy work, and it doesn't happen overnight. That's the other thing. Because I know often as educators, we think if something comes in one year, it's going to be gone the next year. And you have to set a tone as a leader that is not the case with this. We should be doing it already. We're working to get better. And so you have to be consistent, and you got to hold people accountable too. So, and you have to make sure that your school or your district is very clear on what they stand for and support as well. So these are a lot of good things to take in, and you really do have to reach your school and your community on the best approaches, but we're definitely providing some tips that you need to be aware of and take in consideration.
So what I'm hearing is listening, and I'm hearing having thick skin. so that you can embrace what comes to you. Ms. Lewis, before we transition to our next question, is there anything else you would add, speaking not as a school leader, but speaking as an informal school leader, in terms of what leaders need to think about as they're transitioning their schools and dealing with trying to create a more culturally inclusive environment?
I think what was said was very important. I think that there's a lot of discussion about creating positive classroom community. Within your classroom, you want to create this space that's inclusive, so on and so forth. But I don't think there's enough of community outside of the classroom. Why are we not connecting to the organizations, the churches, the librarians, the parks and recs, all the things that make up the community that you're serving? I would like to see more of that happening. I think as a teacher, what I would like to see is the African American subgroup dealt with as an emergency. Like, we sit and we look at, okay, our students are coming in. This is, I teach high school. My ninth graders are showing up third, fourth, fifth grade reading Lexile levels, right? Why is the African American student subgroup not teased out of that? And there needs to be a discussion of, we're failing. What is going wrong here? What can we be doing, right, to increase this? This, for me, is an emergency. When I have a 14-year-old with a third grade reading level, that's an emergency. Why are we not addressing that? Why are we not addressing that? Because I say we're not addressing it because it's not changing. So what we're doing is not working. And I feel like I need to see more professional development around culturally responsive teaching. I came across it during my work on my master's, but it's not something that's embedded in the teacher credentialing program. It's not something that you're just going to come across unless you're looking for it. So I think that there needs to be more focus on that, and it needs to be purposeful, because what is being done is not working. So we need to try what does work.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So our final question really looks at the best practices that exist in the Seen and Affirmed data brief for both Black educators and Black students. And when you look at the list for Black educators, in your opinion, which of those best practices are directly linked to the success of Black students? So I can share one is having anti-racist schools, having staff that look like those students, but also making space for those Black educators. And then we also have engaging parents as co-educators. In your opinion, which is the one that directly links to the success of Black students? And anyone can answer that.
I think strong partnerships with parents is very important. I've seen children go from no production to my A student after I was successfully able to make a real partnership with the family. And I think that what has worked for me in order to do that is reaching out before the negative call. Just at the beginning of the school year, hi, I'm Miss Lewis. I'm your teacher. I'm your child's biology teacher. I want to partner with you. This is who I am. This is how I'm approaching my classroom, lessons. This is what I need from you. This is what you can expect from me. And I think that a lot of parents, first of all, they were, the school's calling, so they're alarmed. Then when they realize I'm just calling to say hi and I want to connect, that right there creates a true partnership in the beginning. So that has to be done very purposefully. So then later on, when I realize that maybe their student needs support and I'm calling to say that I need you to support when I'm doing in the classroom, they're much more receptive to that. I do believe that because of the large educational debt that is owed to our community, whether we know that and we can articulate that in a direct way, I think subconsciously there's a loss of confidence in schools. And I think you see that when parents are not, you're trying to figure out why these parents aren't engaged as we would like them to be. And so we have to take that step to make that partnership. And I think once that happens, then, our students can soar.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's such a difficult question because in my mind, all of those things are intertwined. I think you cannot have productive partnerships with parents if you are not at the same time engaged in anti-racist practices. Mm-hmm. I think you cannot have Black educators in your building if you are not at the same time engaged in anti-racist practices. And so that's why I'm going to lean on the anti-racist practice piece. And I think because that allows you, when you notice my Black students are not reading on grade level at the same rate as this other subgroup, that allows you to ask why, and it removes the blame from the child, right? So, and again, it's leading with that anti-racist practice. When you have parents, Black parents, who maybe they're not showing up at the same rate, by showing up, I mean like coming to events at the same rate as other parents, you leading with an anti-racist lens shifts the blame. You are no longer blaming the parent. Well, it's because these parents do this or these parents believe that. You are more analyzing the system that has created space to where it feels as if you don't have authentic parent partnership with your Black parents, right? When you look at your school, I'm just thinking like standing down the hallway and seeing your educators, right? You are bothered if you lead with anti-racism when you have a population of Black students and not one Black teacher. Like that bothers you, right? And so I would say you first need to, I'm thinking about anti-racism and the work that folks just need to do in that period, right? So do the work there. Do the work and like the mirror work in yourself. And what does anti-racism mean to you? How do you make sure that you show up as an anti-racist on a daily basis so that you become bothered by the systems that have created the conditions for Black people to not be successful in our schools?
And just to sum it up, I know for me too, I had to like look at myself first. So that was definitely a key piece of it. But I think it all just comes down to having a sense of belonging too. Like it's hard to pick one over the other because they do intertwine, but it does come down to a sense of belonging for everybody and relationships with everybody. and involving those key stakeholders and everything.
Good.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Earley, did you want to add on something?
No, well, actually, people say no, and then they have three other things they want to say. I think that, they all touched on it. And one of the things in the report that was really, that really stood out, and as Ms. Aguilar says, they're kind of all tied together, is this issue of having culture connected to everything. Because even as we talk about anti-racist practices, right now, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of terms that are really being thrown out, and folks don't really know what they mean. So we need to spend some time kind of really digesting and peeling back so that people can understand what's at the core of these terms. But the other part is that culture in every space. I think we need to equip our teachers and our families to be able to use Black history, not as facts, figures, and famous people, but as a truth that has shaped this country and the world, that we see when kids have a great understanding of that, they have a greater sense of belongingness, as Dr. Cooper said, and a better understanding of themselves, which translates directly into school success. So we really have to have culture connected to everything. So yes, great job, ladies. Thank you.
I love that. I want to just summarize some major points that were made during this panel. I think if you walk away from this panel not having something in your pocket, you weren't listening. So I'm going to definitely recap because there were some huge points made. The first thing we learned and heard was the power of Black educators being in our schools. And I think that was profound, hearing Miss Felicia Lewis say, my student needed me to be who I am. That is one small piece of why it is important to have us in the classroom, right? That is huge. We heard Ms. Aguilar say, if our students don't see themselves in you and the way you walk and talk, they are going to have this perception that is not who I'm supposed to mean. We also heard that Black educators existing in a space that isn't made for them is hard, right? And we heard that from, let me find that quote. Dr. Cooper specifically said it. It is important we provide Black teachers spaces where they can connect with other teachers of color, like affinity groups. That is important, and we have to bring that to the forefront. And the other piece that I think is super powerful as you continue to read the data brief is, like Dr. Earley said, is that culture has to be connected to all of this. And so Ms. Lewis highlighted the importance of culturally responsive pedagogy. And that's not something that's just owned by us as Black women, as Black men. That's not just us. We need our allies to really learn and entrench themselves in the knowledge around that. Like Dr. Earley said, familiarize yourself with those terms. Step into it because we're faced with small numbers of Black educators in our schools. So we need our allies to step up and really understand that aspect of culturally responsive pedagogy. I thank you, panelists, for really being real. I think a lot of folks in the comments were like, you all are just being transparent. You all are being truth speakers right now. So I really appreciate you all and being that truth. So I hope you all feel the gratitude in the comments and feel filled by some of the things that you heard from each other. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to transition to the call to action. Thank you. So our first thing that we are asking everyone to do as a direct next step is to join us Saturday, February 20th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time to participate in the Black Educator Advocates Network's full body meeting, where we have a team of Black educators meeting to really address this issue in our local area, but also across the state of California. We really need to address that data point of there being more than 78,000 Black students without a Black educator. Feel free, you'll see in the comments a form to receive the Zoom link. So fill out that form and you will get the Zoom link to participate in that meeting on Saturday. The second thing is to share the Seen and Affirmed data brief with principals, district officials, and other educators. And I want to be clear, the Black Educator Advocates Network, our actual meetings, we are specific about only having Black educators in those meetings. But the sharing piece is where our allies step in, right? You as an ally sharing the Seaman and Affirmed data brief with other staff, with other educators and Black educators is furthering that conversation. So share. You can visit blackeducatoradvocatesnetwork.org, blackeducatorsadvocate.org to really see the report and stay connected with the work that we are doing. And then lastly, follow us. Like our page on Facebook, Black Educators Advocate, and follow us on IG, Instagram, Black Educators Advocate. We thank you so much for participating today. Dr. Earley, do you have any final words before we end?
Yeah, I have two.
Okay.
3, actually. 4, maybe. Great job, Jaleesa. I don't know how many words that is. That's 3, right? This has been an outstanding panel. I think that it begins a conversation. I'm excited about the work of the Black Educator Advocates Network, and I'm just proud that, to share this forum with you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and just really seeing the report. From the moment that we met, I feel like you were someone that I've known for a while. So I just appreciate your realness as well. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye, folks.